Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, of the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful December the 6th, 2019. Grando Deportes, Big C, will be traveling on this beautiful Friday, so Charlton will be doing this solo. I just feel such appreciation. We have this beautiful weather in Northern California until it starts to rain and snow a little bit later this evening, but I think we're all good so far. And I want to know if we're going to get through this Pac-12 championship without a deluge of rain. I think not. It may be affected by that. I do want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. Also, Big C Sports, sponsored by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing. Also, want to tell you, you can follow Big C Sports Podcast on Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Want to make sure that people also know that Big C Sports is acknowledged by iHeartRadio Podcast. That's one of the top podcasts on the platform, which is the largest platform in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. I want to also jump into this National Suicide Hotline. I know sometimes people say, look, we already celebrated Veterans Day. Why do we got to talk about it? I want to make sure that we do our part to help people. And if there's any way to help people by giving out a message, I want to make sure that Big C Sports is always a part of that, not just someone to give you scores. Anyone going through issues, military veterans, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255 and get some help. I know a lot of times this time of year, people are just looking at ways to get through the holidays, and sometimes if they have issues, they have nowhere to go. So we want to make sure we give that number out for a lot of people. I want to make sure also, we're coming up on, it's almost like playoffs are already here for the NFL, but we know it's not, but it is here for college football. Pac-12 championship. It will be decided tonight in Northern California. There might be some inclement weather down at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. And the Pac-12, they've been, I guess, more marginalized than a lot of other conferences. I would say the SEC is probably the best football conference just because they have teams that have won national championships. From Alabama, they've won a couple. LSU has won in the past. Florida has won national championships in the past. Tennessee has won national championships in the past. Georgia's always knocking on that door, but they haven't been able to get in. So everybody has their opinion about who's the best conference. Well, let's look at the Big Ten. How many national championship programs have come out of the Big Ten? You only have Ohio State, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I know Michigan split a national championship back in the day, but if we're talking about over the last couple of decades, then you're really only looking at Ohio State out of that conference. So how is that any better than what the Pac-12 offers? Who's won a national championship out of the Pac-12 since the last 2 decades? You have USC. They won a couple of them. In fact, I believe they won 3. They restricted 1. But when you say who's the best conference in college football, you can't say that the Big Ten has more championship teams than the Pac-12. Oregon has been in the playoff bracket. We know they lost to Ohio State in the inaugural BCS Final Four. But I still say they're a very solid program. And then Washington got in as well, and they were knocked out by Alabama. So if you pull from that standing alone, you got to look at Pac-12 as being a viable conference. I think Utah is a better team than Oregon, but it doesn't mean they're going to win because Oregon can throw the ball. Even though they don't defend as well, they have a chance. Tonight's Pac-12 championship game, Santa Clara, California, number 5 Utah Utes and they'll play the number 13 ranked Oregon Ducks. Now, I think Ducks do better in the rain than a Ute does, but we'll find out tonight in Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. So the kickoff's 8 o'clock Eastern Time on ABC Sports, and the firepower for these two programs is a lot more on the Oregon offensive side, but the Utah defense, I think it's a little bit better. There's nothing guaranteed to the Pac-12 champ. Even if once beaten, Utah should prevail. The Ducks got a shot at the national title down in the desert when they lost, and they lost to a freshman quarterback, so that's going to hurt. Even if Oregon wins, they're not getting in, of course, but if Utah wins, they can always say that they beat a team in Oregon, ranked 13th, but you look at their two losses. They lost to Arizona State, which has nearly 5 losses on this season, and then Auburn, but they're not going to finish in the top of the SEC either, even though they did knock off Alabama. So that hurts Utah in a sense based on their opponent. And then Utah's one loss. They lost to Southern California, which is ranked in the top 25 in the country, depending on what poll. Their biggest non-conference win was against BYU. And then you think about what they did on the road, because the national championship games will be played on the road. Since their late September setbacks at Southern California, they've been on a roll. They had a close call during that stretch. It was 33-28 at Washington, and that was back November 2nd. And they had to pull that win out by the skin of their teeth. How would that travel on the road? If they had a hard time winning at Washington, which is not in contention for the Pac-12 championship now, they were still knocking on the door back then, it makes it really difficult. If you're watching Utah, their hopes are in the hands of their quarterback, Tyler Huntley. He's a kid out of Florida. He's a run option kind of quarterback, a lot like Lamar Jackson. And even if you want to say, Russell Wilson, he's a guy that can keep the ball alive through the air and also on the ground. And that makes a big difference when Utah has the ball. The strength of them is their defensive front, defensive end Bradley Ali, and also defensive tackle Leki Fotu. Their backers are linebacker Darren Lloyd. I mean, he's a solid player for Utah. But as much as I love the Pac-12, college football has spent a lot of time this year pumping a guy by the name of Justin Herbert out of Oregon, even up for Heisman Trophy consideration before the season began. But they had a lot of receivers been hit by injury, so that's affected them also. Oregon is still a very good team, but they've lost a lot of credibility when you start saying, well, who do they lose to? And you got to look at some of the teams that beat them have freshman quarterbacks. But I think Herbert gives them a chance. Running back duo of C.J. Verdell and Travis Dye are good on the offensive side of the ball for Oregon, and his top target lately has been wide receiver Johnny Johnson. I think Utah has a chance to get in, of course, if they win. I don't think the pollsters want them in, just my opinion, because if we contrast them in the Big 12 championship game that I'm going to bring up, I like Utah the way they play defense. Offensively, they're decent, but I still haven't seen them beat a Power 5 team outside of their own conference. That's to me, that's important. They had the biggest winners over BYU. So I'm going to draw this comparison, and I don't like doing it, but I just want to say the truth, and you can Google the truth. As we look at the Big 12 championship game, that's going to be in Arlington, Texas. Number 6, Oklahoma. They will play number 8, Baylor, and that's a Saturday noontime kickoff Eastern Time on ABC Sports. The winner will need a couple of dominoes to fall also. But you think about the Sooners, with their higher ranking and their earlier head-to-head win against the Baylor Bears, it seems like they're in a better position. They've already seen what Baylor can offer. I thought Baylor had a better chance at an ambush in the first game. I think Oklahoma would play better the second time around, and maybe Baylor will as well. It's hard to trust Oklahoma's defense because they've had too many come-from-behind wins, and that may not be sexy for the Bowl Championship Series. But what I will say is when you look at Utah over the last 30 years, where have they been? They've been in the WAC Conference, Mountain West Conference, and they moved into the Pac-12. You look at Oklahoma. They were Big 8 champions going back many, many moons. I remember still watching Oklahoma's program under the great Barry Sitzer, and they would always end up winning the Big 8 championship and then going to the Orange Bowl where they would play another team. But I remember they had a 25-10 win over the Penn State Nittany Lions, former coach Paterno, and they had Jamel Holloway, who was a quarterback in that game, Brian Bosworth on defense. They had Keith Jackson at tight end, and that was a team that was a media name, just like a search engine optimization. You start Googling names, where their names came up. You don't have that with Utah's program. You also have a huge contingent of people who will travel and the games are going to be down south, so that's going to be easier. The last thing television wants to see, and especially the sponsors, is to have a bowl game that's not sold out. You're not going to have that issue if Oklahoma gets in. And people might say, well, Utah will sell out too. Look at the crowd tonight in the Pac-12 championship game. I would love it to be a sellout crowd. But the last time they played in there, which was last year, there was less than 35,000 fans in the stadium for the Pac-12 championship. And last I recall, Utah was part of that too. So when you look at what's going on with Oklahoma, of course, it's Jalen Hurts. He has to avoid giving the ball away, but he's still a solid player. I mean, if Jalen Hurts gets in to this Final Four, remember, name recognition. We talked about the earlier years. Oklahoma got in Brian Bosworth, Jamal Holloway, Keith Jackson, just so many players that they built their name on the players and the school. Utah doesn't have that. Well, now you have Jalen Hurts. If he gets in, he will have taken Alabama to the Bowl Championship Series, and now the Oklahoma Sooners. And both teams, their names carry a bigger weight nationally than the Utah Utes. And I like Utah, but before I start following Utah with a lot of love and respect for their program, they have to schedule a Georgia in the non-league. They got to schedule a Texas program in the non-league. They got to go pick up a Florida and beat a Florida. And, of course, they're in the Pac-12, but go up and play Nebraska or play Wisconsin. That just builds your program, because every now and then you'll have a team that steps up and you'll say, well, look, it's not about the last couple of decades. It's about what they've done now. But they don't carry the name recognition, and the name recognition is what makes people pay attention to television. I know that's my opinion, and everybody has their own opinions. But when you look at Baylor, while OU has they staged a great second half rally, the Sooners fans, they can't keep living that way. They got up on Georgia in the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago, and Georgia came back. Baker Mayfield took a hit to the side, and he was injured, and that kind of cost them then. But if you look at what Baylor does, the Bears have a defensive end, James Lynch. He'll try to make it difficult for Hurts and good old boys from Oklahoma. Baylor quarterback Charlie Brewer's most dangerous downfield threat is wide receiver Denzel Mims, averaging 15 yards a catch. But at the same time, if you contrast him to what OU has, they have CeeDee Lamb averaging 20 yards a catch. So if you're looking at Utah winning and you're looking at Oklahoma winning, let's just say those are the two higher ranked teams. For Utah, you're looking at Tyler Huntley. Who around the country, who knows Tyler Huntley? Around the country, people know Justin Herbert more so. It's about name recognition too. I know that matters. That's why they always mention names of NFL players. Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Even basketball back in the day, Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, LeBron James and the LA Lakers or Cleveland Cavaliers or Miami Heat. Those name recognitions matter. CeeDee Lamb has a lot of reputation, averaging 20 yards a catch. You know the NFL eyeballs will be all over him. So I hope both teams win, because I want to hear that conversation as to who should get in and why. At the same time, I look at the ACC conference, and that's a conference to me that's given too much credibility. I know Louisville, when Jackson was there up for Heisman Trophy contention, it was a reason to watch them all the time. In Florida State, they've fallen on hard times, so no more Charlie Ward leading Florida State as a dual athlete. If I look at what's going on in the ACC, that game is in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a number 3 Clemson versus number 22 Virginia, which is the lowest ranked championship team in the Power 5 games. That's not going to hurt Clemson because they haven't lost a game in 2 years. But the number 3 ranking is solid. Even if they win by a touchdown, which is going to win by 3 or 4 touchdowns in my opinion, if Virginia should play the Tigers close, it just hasn't happened all year. Outside of when they lost that game, in my opinion, they lost the game to North Carolina, and for some reason, the ACC needed not to do a lot of replays on that goal line when I believe the quarterback got in on the pitch. That's just my opinion. But Clemson's in. They've been there as consistently as Alabama, even more so than Alabama if you look at the last 3 years. So I look at a lot of things that are going on for Clemson. But when you think about why watch Clemson, Clemson's backfield duo of quarterback Trevor Lawrence and running back Travis Etienne might be the best in the country. Virtually unstoppable since that game in North Carolina where I still believe they lost. You have Virginia's linebacker Zane Zandler and Jordan Mack, they'll do their best to keep an eye on those two guys, but they won't succeed. Wide receivers T. Higgins and Justin Rose, if the blitz arrives too late, they're going to have a lot of success too. So why watch Virginia? The Cavaliers quarterback Bryce Perkins does it all for the offense, but he's going to need a lot of help. They really don't have a chance, in my opinion, against the Tigers. You got linebacker Isaiah Simmons for Clemson. They're just a solid team, and so we've looked at the Pac-12 championship game. I hope that Utah wins, but Oregon has the firepower that can knock them out. I would love to see Oklahoma over Baylor. Of course, congratulations, Baylor, but they don't have the eyeball test. They don't pass it. Oklahoma does. And I think it would be a great storyline, Jalen Hurts taking two different programs to the BCS championship playoff game. I think that's amazing for one player to do that. I want to bring up the Big Ten champions. This is not the days of Woody Hayes. It's just not even Truxell. But this coach in Day, I think he's the real deal. He doesn't have a lot of friends on the other staff, so as far as running up the score, doesn't bother him at all. The Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis, number 2 Ohio State versus number 10 Wisconsin. That's a Saturday kickoff, 8 o'clock p.m. East Coast time on Fox. And when you think about these programs, the thing that I love about it is Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields had a brief injury scare that they had the city of Columbus holding his breath, but at the same time, he's a run-pass option. He reminds me so much of the quarterbacks that we're seeing now, whether it's Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, guys that can stand in the pocket and throw it 60 yards downfield, or they can run for 15 to 20 yards on any given play. So that makes you have to stay in the pocket for them. You got to keep containment, and Big C talks about that all the time. But I love what they offer. And in the backfield, running back J.K. Dobbins, wide receiver Chris Olave around him. It's amazing how dominant Ohio State's been. However, this team has always had a hiccup the last couple of years. Outside of beating Oregon, and Ezekiel Elliott was the reason for that in the BCS championship game in the Final Four, they went to Alabama and then Oregon. Oregon beat up on Florida State in the Rose Bowl, and then fell short with Marcus Mariota in that game. And why is that important? Because J.K. Dobbins is a threat to run and pass. And I just think they're so dominant. But at the same time, they've dropped the game the last couple of years. It was Iowa one year and Purdue the other. I don't see that happening, but if it does, you got to look at the Badgers. Their running back, Jonathan Taylor, may be the best in the country. Everybody says that about their own players. But he really is legit, and I think he merits that type of attention as being mentioned, at least one of the top 3 or 4 running backs in the country. He's an amazing player. And then you think about that. Wisconsin, Jonathan Taylor, he remains a primary mover on offense. They have no other choice. They got to pound the football. You can't outscore Ohio State. We know what happened the first time. It was a beatdown. And the Buckeyes are playing inside, so there'll be no problems with the weather. And I think that gives Ohio State a clear advantage over that. But outside of Ohio State, can you tell me anybody who's won national championship? At least in the last 2 decades. I know Michigan was voted co-champions, but outside of that, they haven't had it. It's just been the Buckeyes. They really got to carry the banner for that conference. In the conference that a lot of people are really hyped about, the SEC championship, that game is in Atlanta, Georgia. Number 1, LSU versus number 4, Georgia. Saturday, 4 o'clock p.m. East Coast time on CBS Sports. And if you think about one of my favorite coaches, it's Coach Ed Orgeron, about to make a lot of money. And I know the Trojans at USC, they kept Clay Helton. They had Orgeron at one time, but they did not like the sound of his voice, and they had to move on. So what is it about Georgia and LSU? I don't think Georgia has much of a chance in this game, but you always have a chance when you're playing the game. If the Bulldogs win this game, I still think LSU gets in because they've had such big wins at the time over Texas, and then of course the game over Auburn, and then beating Alabama, which everybody knows that was the game, maybe the game of the week, but game of the year in my opinion. So those two teams, no one can tell me that Georgia's a better team than Alabama. I just don't see it. But they're in the SEC championship game. The marquee matchup pits LSU high-octane attack. It puts up 560 yards a game. And we talk about the eyeball test and how there's names that carry these championship games. Well, this team puts up 48 points a game. That's tops in the SEC. And then if you look at Georgia, their defense is running just 257 yards and 10.4 points per contest, but they'll give that up by halftime. LSU will have over 250 yards at halftime, and they'll have over at least 14 to 21 points at halftime. So that 10.4 points a contest against LSU, I don't think anyone can do that. I may be wrong, but I know I've seen the way they can run and pass the ball, and it's hard to stop because they go for the jugular. Tigers quarterback Joe Burrow enters with 44 touchdown passes, and he's hitting 78% of his passes. If they were to throw every 3 out of 4 times, he's going to complete 78% of those passes. That's why it's almost impossible to beat them. Defense wins championships, yes, but this offense is hard to stop them. I think the only 2 teams that can handle them and slow them down would be Ohio State and Clemson. That's just my opinion. So we'll see what happens down south. You look at wide receivers. George Perkins suspended for the first half after last week's ejection. That doesn't help for Georgia. Running back DeAndre Swift also dealing with a shoulder injury, and that's going to help a little bit for Fromm. But Fromm hasn't been as spot on as a lot of people would like to see a Heisman Trophy contender be, and that's just my opinion. I think it's going to be a solid football game for LSU, and I hope I'm not wrong, because if I am, I'll just come out and say it. But I know, and Big C, I know we may disagree on this. I really think of all the conference championship games, the one that could end up in a blowout, and let's just say blowout is about a 3 touchdown difference. I think LSU has that chance. I know Georgia's good, but it just feels like it's LSU's year, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, and I'm going to come back and finish the second half, and we're going to go heavy on the NFL. Big C's traveling. I'll be going solo. I'll be back in just a moment. All right, I'm back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over the universe on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. And the apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. And again, I want to just acknowledge, thank you, Big C, iHeartRadio, sent out information, one of the top podcasts out of the 250,000 podcasts that are on the #1 network in the country. So really appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports Podcast. Week 14 NFL game previews. Carolina Panthers, I know they got rid of their coach, Rivera. He will land on his feet, trust me. They're 5-7. At the Atlanta Falcons that are 3-9. That's a 1 o'clock kickoff. East Coast time Sunday on Fox Sports. And the Falcons are favored by 2.5. And the key for the Falcons is just find a way to keep running the football. I know Matt Ryan has to stay upright. He gave up 9 sacks by the Saints on Thanksgiving. 9. You can't get sacked 9 times in a month, let alone in one game. They got to keep Matt Ryan healthy. And if you expect that to happen, I don't know if their offensive line is good enough to do that. For the Carolina Panthers, they got to get the ball to Christian McCaffrey and allow Kyle Allen to make simple plays. And if he can do that, then, I don't know how to pick this game. You really don't know. That the Panthers have maybe some emotional issues, losing their head coach. Will that show up? It showed up last night in Chicago, where the Cowboys, with Garrett in a lot of people's minds already gone. They don't have to say it, but the players play like it. And if you don't have that belief in the leader, who's your leader, then sometimes you don't play well. And Chicago showed that last night. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But also, I want to get to the game, maybe the game of the day, but probably not, because I want to give that to San Francisco. But everyone has their own opinion. Baltimore Ravens, 10-2 at the Buffalo Bills, 9-3. The weather should be inclement, but Baltimore is used to that as well. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff, East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports. The Ravens are favored by 5.5 with superstar Lamar Jackson. His playmaking skills, they've shown up early and often. The Ravens scored at least 30 points in 5 of the last 6 games. A lot of people thought we saw the preview of the NFL Super Bowl when we had San Francisco travel to Baltimore. And we'll see, because both teams play great defense. And the 49ers are the only team to slow down Baltimore in the last many, many moons. And so I don't know if Buffalo's defense is as good as the 49ers. In fact, I doubt it. The Ravens have a 5.5-point favorite going on the road. We'll see what happens. However, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, the defense has to keep up within striking distance. And I don't know if they can. The Bills' offense has scored 30 points only twice, both times against the Miami Dolphins. That's a different breed of cat when you look at the Baltimore Ravens. I look at Baltimore getting that win. I mean, everybody has their own opinion. Cincinnati Bengals 1-11 after the Cleveland Browns that are 5-7. Odell Beckham Jr. saying, wait until the end of the year to see where I'll be. That shows he's already out of there. Doesn't have the desire to stay there unless things are going great. But who's on your side when things go against you? And that's a guy they put a lot of money and hope in, but he's already saying he's not talking about being there next year. But that's his opinion. He can do what he wants to do. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff, East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports. And the Browns are favored by 8.5, and they may just get 8.5 over the Bengals, even though the Bengals got a win last week. You can't count on them winning too many games. You think about what's going on in this game. Cincinnati passes on nearly 2/3 of its offensive plays. If running back Joe Mixon finds early success, it would help neutralize the Browns' pass rush. The quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, Baker Mayfield, has been making the smarter decisions and not trying to do it all on his own, looking at wide receivers like Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., running back Kareem Hunt. He's thriving in the passing game. I think that helps him a lot. Cleveland should win this by at least double digits. And as we go into the nation's capital, we have a beautiful city in Washington, D.C., a very historic city. The Redskins are 3-9, and they go on the road at the Green Bay Packers Lambeau Field that are 9-3. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff East Coast time, Sunday on Fox Sports, and the Packers are favored by 12.5, and they should get it. You have Discount Double Check. If ever you need a quarterback that you can depend on, he's not what he used to be, but who is? But I still trust Discount Double Check in that game. The Packers have to get the ball to running back Aaron Jones and wide receiver Devontae Adams out of Fresno State. They got to force Dwayne Haskins to win by standing in the pocket and create takeaways that way, and they'll probably get that done too. Dwayne Haskins is going to be a star, as he was at Ohio State, but it's going to take some time. The Denver Broncos have to be one of the more, I say, disappointing teams in the NFL just because of the tutelage of John Elway. They got Flacco to come there when he was sent packing from Baltimore, and he has Super Bowl experience, but there's a lot of things going on in Denver. They lose a lot of close games up in Mile High Stadium, but this game is going to be they're 4-8 at the Houston Texans 8-4. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports, and the Texans are favored by 7.5, and I think they'll get it. Denver can neutralize the dynamic offense if they can get pressure on Watson, but I doubt it. You have running backs Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. They're always a tough load. The Texans, Houston is amazing. Their offense led by Deshaun Watson, who sometimes holds the ball too long. Even though he's very talented, he seems to be able to throw sideways. The hope that Denver has is that they can force him into trying to do too much, which he seems to be able to do, but oftentimes it can cost them as well. But I still don't see that being a close game. I see the Texans, unless they have turnovers the way they did when they went into Baltimore and just they stunk up the joint, I think they'll get out with a win at home. And look at what they did to New England. You know the Broncos are not as good as New England. Going up north, the Detroit Lions 3-8-1 at the Minnesota Vikings 8-4 on the season. That's a 1 o'clock kickoff. East Coast time Sunday on Fox Sports. The Vikings are favored by 12.5, and they got to know they had a chance when they were in Seattle. But chances can slip through your fingers, as it happened when they had a couple of turnovers up in Seattle. They may not have that misfortune at home playing against the Lions. I know Kirk Cousins has never won a game on the road, Monday night game, and hasn't had a playoff win. But the $84 million makes up for a lot. Big C, I know you say that he's somebody's cousin, but I know that when you're at home and you have the defense like the Vikings, it's hard for anyone to beat them, especially in the Dome. But don't lose focus on this game. If you're Detroit Lions, it's still a rival. I still think the Vikings are a much talented team. If they can find ways to just run the football more, and even though they have Cousins, he has to learn to hand off a little bit more no matter who's in the backfield. I still like the Vikings at home in that game. Another game that I think might be the game of the day, and there's going to be a couple of them. These two teams, they should see each other again in the playoffs, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. They're 10-2 on the season, at the New Orleans Saints, also 10-2. That's a 1 o'clock kickoff, East Coast time Sunday on Fox Sports. The Saints are favored by 2.5. And I don't buy it. I know they're in the Dome. I know it's raucous in the Dome. It's loud. They must find ways to stop an elite run game. That Saints defense, I don't know if they can. They haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in his past 38 games. But the 49ers are more than just that. Garoppolo's not the same quarterback as Drew Brees. Everybody knows that. Garoppolo averages about a yard per carry when he has to run. The best thing he can do for the 49ers to win is stay in the pocket and trust his wide receivers and let their defense get on the field. San Francisco expects to get leading rusher Matt Breida back for this game, and if they do, I think that's enough in itself to carry the 49ers to win on the road down in New Orleans. But the Saints have Drew Brees. They have all the great players that we've talked about over the past years that he can always throw to. But there's a player I want you to keep in mind. When the Saints offense has the ball, look for quarterback Taysom Hill. They have to put him in the game. I know Drew Brees is the guy. But on option plays, in an attempt to mimic the success that the Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson had against the 49ers defense, because they were losing outside containment. I think what the 49ers realized, they just did it after the game, assign someone to hit Lamar Jackson anyway. No matter if he has the ball to run or pass, they have that, and that way you don't get fooled by the fakes. And Taysom Hill can do the same thing for the New Orleans Saints. I still think Drew Brees will have a decent game, but they got to run the ball more because the 49ers have a good defense, and I don't know of the health of all the players in the secondary for the 49ers, but I still think Sherman had a little hitch in his giddy-up, but Richard Sherman should be able to play. You know, they know how to numb the pain. I think the 49ers defense is a better defense on the field. I don't see them losing back-to-back. I also think what will help the 49ers is they did not come back to San Francisco after the loss at Baltimore. They went down to Florida and to practice at IMG Academy, and that saved them from having a lot of back and forth travel across the country. So I'm looking for the Niners to go in there and sneak a win. I might be wrong, but I'm really thinking the Niners have the better team going into that game anyway. The Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins, 3-9 at the New York Jets, 4-8. That's a 1 o'clock kickoff East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports. And the Jets are favored by 5.5. You think about the Miami Dolphins, they sacked the Jets quarterback Sam Darnold 3 times and 9 quarterback hits on him in an earlier game. But think about what happened in that game. The Jets got a little bit better. I know they got a little bit better because they've been playing better lately. That first game was a 26-18 victory. This to me, it looks like the Jets will edge out the Dolphins. They're just a better team now. Sam Darnold has played much better recently, and he hasn't had it. Since that loss to the Dolphins, he learned more in a loss than he would have ever learned in a win, in my opinion. Adam Gase and his team are locked in at home, and it looks like the Jets will get a win out of that one. This is a big game coming up, too, just for the sake of who's going to keep their jobs. The Indianapolis Colts, they're 6-6 at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 5-7. That's a 1 o'clock kickoff East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports. And the Buccaneers are favored by 3.5 points in this one. And the Colts, obviously, on the road, not as good as they are at home with that noise in the crowd. If they can do anything to win, they got to find a way to get Jameis Winston to throw more picks. He's been doing that too many times. Expect Tampa Bay to stick with the passing game, but they're going to have to give him some time. I like Winston, but I don't like his turnovers, and I'm sure he doesn't either. And I look at Tampa Bay getting that win there. Another game that's going to go on down south, the L.A. Chargers, 4-8, at the Jacksonville Jaguars, also 4-8. That's a 4:05 kickoff East Coast time Sunday on Fox Sports. And what do you say about the Chargers? They're favored by 2.5, going down to the south. Their defense is talented, but it struggles against the run, allowing 110 yards per game. If the Chargers can hold running back Leonard Fournette in check, then it has a chance. But you think about pass rushers Marvin Ingram and Joey Bosa in position where they can get after Gardner Minshew, and he's back after being chosen over Nick Foles. But I still see the Chargers have the ability to go on the road and get a win in this game. It's all up to Phillip Rivers. Can they not turn the ball over? I think he has the last year in the Chargers uniform, just my opinion. But he's been a great quarterback for the Chargers, but they'll probably move on when they go to the new stadium in Los Angeles. And then if you go to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Arizona Cardinals, I think Tomlin definitely should be up for Coach of the Year, at least in the top 2 or 3. 7-5. They're at the Arizona Cardinals 3-8-1. It's a 4:25 kickoff East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports. The Steelers are favored by 2.5, and it's down in the desert. There's not going to be any inclement weather. Quarterback Kyler Murray has to help out in the running game, led by Kenyon Drake. The Steelers had 8.5 tackles for a loss, 5 sacks and an interception in Week 13 against Cleveland. Similar kind of quarterbacks in Baker Mayfield and also Kyler Murray. Can the Steelers go on the road and win? Probably so. They just have the moxie going for them. And the Cardinals can't stop the bleeding right now with losing streak, and they're struggling, but they're young. I think the defense has allowed a combined 55 points over its last 3 games. So I give the Steelers maybe not a double-digit win, but definitely a win in this contest. Coming up on a game that might be the game of the week. It's almost like every game is a game of the week. We have the 49ers at the Saints. We have now coming up the Chiefs at the Patriots, and also the Ravens at Buffalo. Kansas City 8-4, Patriots 10-2. You remember this last year? It was a playoff game. I thought the Chiefs were robbed. They were robbed at home. Maybe they can go to New England and start doing their own robbing. It's a 4:25 kickoff East Coast time Sunday on CBS Sports. The Patriots are favored by 2.5. Quarterback Tom Brady, he's on a high pace to throw a lot of touchdowns, but he has to throw a lot of throwaways also. He's just not getting the receivers to get open the way he wants to. I know people say Brady can do it and yell at people the way he wants to, but if you want to bring teams together, they got to get a receiver in there that can get on the same page with Tom Brady. I think that alone will give Patrick Mahomes a chance to go into New England. You know he's going to have a lot of pressure. They're going to blitz him a lot. Belichick is going to do that. But running back, LaShawn McCoy and his offensive line will need to create and exploit space in the middle. The Patriots don't give up a lot of yards, but when you look at what happened against Houston and what Deshaun Watson did to them, also against Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, I'm not saying that Mahomes is the same kind of runner, but he's probably a better passer. I still give the Chiefs a chance to win this game. You know, they may even call a tripping penalty if Kansas City goes in there and starts to show signs of winning this game. I don't know. I have always, since the Tuck rule and Deflategate, thought that New England got a little bit of help from officiating. It's just my opinion. Can they double-team wide receiver Tyreek Hill and cornerback Jonathan Jones and safety Delvin McCarty while putting on cornerback Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson and Jason McCourty on the other wide receivers? Gilmore could draw tight end Travis Kelce. I think is one of the best in the league. But there's always the New England, they get the benefit of the doubt with home cooking. I don't know how to go with that game. Defensive-wise, obviously the Patriots are a better team. Offensively, the Chiefs can go in there and get it done. They just beat up on the Raiders, 2 different kind of teams. But they seem to find a little bit of moxie. But I don't know if they can overcome the officials in that game. Tennessee Titans 7-5 at the Oakland Raiders in the black hole. And the Raiders got to feel a little bit deflated. They've gone on the road to the Jets and laid an egg. And then in Kansas City, it's like their players have quit. And I don't want to say that about an NFL team quitting, but anyone watching the way this team plays, and you think that John Gruden knows how to get these guys to play football, and of course he has a lot of respect by NFL coaches and players, but it might just be in words. But if your players don't play for you, is that a coach or an owner's problem? So it's a 4:25 kickoff East Coast time Sunday, CBS Sports, and Tennessee comes into Oakland favored by 2.5, one of the final home games that the Raiders will have ever in the history of the Coliseum. They'll be playing in Las Vegas next year. So when I think about Oakland, the run defense that allows nearly 104 yards per game, that's not good. On defense, Tennessee will need to slow down the Raiders' short passing game. I know Derek Carr is not a favorite of John Gruden, even though I think he's a fine quarterback. But the chemistry's gone with the Raiders. Something's not right with it. He should have several receivers open, including tight end Darren Waller. Oakland has a dink and dunk offense that relies on being consistent. But what I saw in the Raiders the last 2 games is they've already handed it in. I would love to see them finish strong in Oakland. I would love to see them show the Oakland fans that we're worth you buying a ticket, but I don't know if that's the case. And I would give the edge to Tennessee just because they're on the road. As Big C always says, there are fewer distractions when you're on the road. And they're playing an Oakland team that just seem to have given up. And I hate saying that. But it seems like it when you lay an egg against the Jets and then lay a bigger egg against Kansas City. It's just my opinion. Seattle Seahawks, what a defense up in Seattle. Legion of Boom number 2. Seattle Seahawks 10-2 at the LA Rams 7-5 at the historic LA Coliseum. It should be a packed house in Southern California. Even though the rain should be gone, the field might be a little bit soggy on Sunday. It's an 8:20 p.m. kickoff, East Coast time Sunday on NBC Sports. And the Seahawks are favored by 2.5, and I think they'll get it. I know when you look at Jared Goff and you look at his ability to throw the ball downfield, whether you look at Todd Gurley, they don't have Russell Wilson. Now, they're not going to win every game, but on the road they have. And if they're going to drop a game, it would most likely be at home versus the 49ers. And, coming up and deciding who's going to win the NFC West. So quarterback Russell Houdini Wilson, the Seahawks shouldn't have much trouble stopping the Rams offense. But moving the ball against the Rams defense could be a bit difficult. The Rams have been playing good football since cornerback Jalen Ramsey arrived in Week 7. But at the same time, the Rams got to do something too. And you look at quarterback Jared Goff, he's regressed significantly, struggling. The offensive line has been bad. Running back Todd Gurley, it looks like a shell of his former self. Is he really hurt? If he's hurt, get him out of there. But they got to keep trying to white out Tyler Lockett. It's so crucial for the Seahawks. He's the best playmaker for Seattle. And then Russell Houdini Wilson. I think this is the game. If it comes down to a field goal, I trust Seattle more than I trust the LA Rams. And, of course, you got Russell Houdini Wilson, and that always makes a big difference for the Seattle Seahawks and the great Pete Carroll. On Monday night, we have the New York Giants at 2-9 at the Philadelphia Eagles 5-7. That's an 8:15 kickoff East Coast time. Monday Night Football on ESPN, and the Eagles are favored by 9.5. The Eagles thrive on creating pressure on the edges, so the Giants must do a better job taking care of and protecting quarterback. Say it ain't so, is it Eli Manning? Eli Manning's back in the saddle, and Big C, you said he would come back, but it because of an injury to Daniel Jones with his ankle issues. But I still look at this game. I don't want him. Everybody might say Eagles win, but if you can have what may seem stupid to say, but an emotional reason to come out and play harder. Eli Manning has won 2 Super Bowls for the New York Giants. Carson Wentz hasn't won anything as far as Super Bowls for the Eagles, even though he had a good year when they got hurt and they went there. But do you trust Carson Wentz? I don't know right now. It's hard to believe in them when they lost to the Dolphins. And I know it was on the road, but still, that team's been struggling. And it seems like they've given up a lot. They lost their confidence against New England. And then Seattle went in there and took their confidence again. And they went on the road. They were going to have an easy win against the Dolphins, and they didn't get it done there. So how can they come back home and play the Giants, who are going to have at least maybe an emotional, appeal with the great Eli Manning? It's in a poor NFC East. Philadelphia's playoffs hopes are still there. The Dallas Cowboys act like they don't want to win it. You have quarterback, Sean Barkley, wide receiver Sterling Shepard have to have huge performances. I want to see Eli finish strong. This will most likely be his final year as a New York football Giant. Everybody loves football in New York. The Jets have been down, and the Giants are down. It's hard to really put your hopes in football on the East Coast, but everybody has their own opinion, and I really look forward to seeing some good football this weekend, especially the 49ers at the Saints. The Jacksonville, obviously they have their issues going on down south with the Chargers, but I'd love to see West Coast teams do well, especially when they go south. Baltimore at Buffalo, a bigger game than a lot of people give it credit for. Buffalo's on the verge of becoming the power of the AFC East. Not this year, but next year. But it could be this year. They still got a game with New England at home. We'll see what happens. And again, it's all fair in love and war. I want to close out Big C Sports today on this beautiful weekend. Going to be a lot of rain and snow in Northern California, and we hope that people can drive safe and stay safe through it. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. And the apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa. Play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. Also, Big C Sports, you can follow us Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Want to just close out today's show talking a little bit of NBA basketball. Their schedule's on hand tonight. Brooklyn is at Charlotte, and they have Indiana Pacers at Detroit, Orlando at Cleveland, Denver is at Boston, Golden State Warriors will take on the Chicago Bulls, Minnesota is at Oklahoma City, Washington is at Miami, the LA Clippers are going to be the second best team in LA. They're at Milwaukee. What a preview this could be of the NBA Finals when you have Kawhi Leonard going up against Giannis and all the good old boys that will be on that floor tonight in Milwaukee. Sacramento at San Antonio, the LA Lakers at the Portland Trailblazers, a reunion for Carmelo Anthony and his friend LeBron James. NBA standings in the Eastern Conference Atlantic Division: Boston 15-5, Toronto's 15-5. They're the top two, followed by Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and New York in the Southeast Division. The Miami Heat 15-6, followed by Orlando at 10-11. That's not a good division when the second place team is under 500. In the NBA Eastern Conference Central, the dynamic Milwaukee Bucks 19-3. We'll see if they're 19-3. We'll go to 20-3, or will it be 19-4 after the Clippers come to town. Indiana at 14-7, followed by Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland. In the Western Conference Southwest Division, Dallas with Luka Doncic 15-6. He's really a star player for the team down in the Lone Star State. Houston, they are great with James Harden, the contestant. That was a made basket when he dunked it in the net. The net rejected it. I thought they were robbed in that game. We'll see what happens with the NBA deciding what happens with that. San Antonio, Memphis, New Orleans are rounding up the house for the Western Conference Southwest Division. In the Western Conference Northwest Division, Denver Nuggets 13-5, Utah Jazz 12-10, followed by Minnesota at 10-10. Portland's really struggled this year. They were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and they were knocked out by the Golden State Warriors, but they're still swinging up in Portland. And then Oklahoma City, since Westbrook left, they've fallen on hard times. And in the Pacific Division, maybe the best division in the NBA, the LA Lakers 19-13, the LA Clippers 16-6, followed by Phoenix, the Sacramento Kings, and the Golden State Warriors, five-time defending Western Conference champion Golden State Warriors, 3 championships in the last 5 years, but those things are over. I know everybody loves sports, and we like to talk it all the time. Sports is a billion-dollar industry. Boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. So we love talking about sports on Big C Sports. I just hope that everybody can have a great weekend. And I want to say a special thanks to my daughter, my only daughter. I have a daughter and a son, but she's graduating from a major university in 3.5 years, double major. She's an honor student. I'm so proud of her. I ask God for her blessings, and I just want to let her know that I am so proud of you. You're so smart and driven and determined, and I think you're the best daughter in the universe. You can follow Big C Sports every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.